Good morning. About a year ago, just a little over, Brian McDonald and I taught a class together entitled Built by the Lord. It was about families. It's about trying to construct our families around the will of God. It was from a book by the same title, written by Edwin Crozier. Many of us here know Brother Crozier. In that time, we learned some great lessons, and I knew right away that's going to turn into some sermons, and for those of you that were in the class, I apologize. You might hear some of the same material again. We've already spent some time this month talking about how we can ignite in our families, and specifically focusing on how we can ignite in our parenting and the relationships that we build with our children. And some of those lessons have been influenced by that book, and others will be as well. If you are raising a family, or know someone raising a family, or have a hope to one day raise a family, I can't suggest enough trying to get your hands on this book. It's taught me many valuable lessons about the way that I should view the family, about the things that I should prioritize in it, and about the importance of taking time to further and build that relationship in a way that glorifies and bears fruit for God. One of the lessons that we looked at in that book began with this really odd story about a magical fish. This fish, once caught, began negotiating its release. It began speaking to the fisherman, and it said, if you'll let me go, if you'll put me back into the water, I'm going to give you this great gift. The gift is you'll be able to skip past anything that is uncomfortable or unpleasant in life. And the fisherman, who was a farmer, decided, I've never caught a fish that talked to me before, so I'm going to go out on a limb and say maybe he can offer me something. Sounds like a pretty good gift, so he puts the fish back, and the fish says the gift has been granted to you. So he goes about his life, goes back to the farm. He is plowing his fields, and he thinks, boy, it is hot out here, and this is just miserable work. I really wish I was done. And immediately he was at home in his house, sitting at the dinner table with his wife, who had fixed a lovely meal, and he enjoyed that meal with her. And so the next day he went back out to the field to plow, and he thought, boy, I wish it was just harvest time already. And immediately he was at the market with all of his produce already having been harvested and set up on the counter to be purchased. And all the hard work is behind him. And he had the body that had went through that, but he didn't have the mind. He had been able to just skip over all of it. And he thought, this is a pretty fantastic gift. And so this went on and on. There came a point in his life when they found out that they were going to have children. His wife was pregnant. And a couple months into that, he said, boy, I wish I could just skip to the point where I'm holding my child. I would have taken that wish, by the way. And before you knew it, he was in the hospital with his wife as they held their beautiful boy. And this continued as he wished past things that were uncomfortable, wished past the sleepless nights, wished past the potty training. He wished right on past the getting a permit to drive. He wished past all the things in life that carry with it things that are stressful and hard. And before you know it, he opened his eyes and he was an old man. And his son was grown and had a wife of his own with children. And they had brought him over, and the kids were playing in the floor, and his wife and his son and daughter-in-law were laughing and sharing some memory that he couldn't remember. It was something that he had skipped over. And he thought back on it and realized he had missed so much. And so he rushed back to the pond and was begging for this fish to surface so he could try to take the gift back. When the fish showed up, it said it can't be reversed. And as he sobbed, he begged him, saying, I didn't value the hard times. I didn't realize that a meal in the evening wasn't as tasty if it didn't come with a hard day's work to prepare you for it. I didn't realize that the loss of a loved one could bring a significance in the family and closeness that maybe wasn't there before. I didn't realize that these hard things in my life were so necessary. As he raised his head up, he realized he wasn't old anymore. He was still sitting at the pond with the fish in his hand, and the fish said, "The gift that I have given you is not the gift to be able to skip past everything. It is the gift to enjoy the journey." So we want to spend just a little bit of time talking about this morning. And if you haven't seen the movie The Sound of Music, then I don't know what you are missing. You don't know what you're missing out on. I don't know how you've went through your life having not seen this fantastic movie. Set some time aside this week to enjoy this cinema classic. And what you will find, I'm going to go ahead and spoil a few things for you. What you will find is a main character by the name of Baron von Trapp, who his lifelong dream was to become a captain in the Austrian Navy. And he has worked towards that and finally became this captain. And Austria gets pulled into World War I, and he is rising through the ranks. He becomes a lieutenant captain, and then he is finally manning his own submarine. He is the captain of a submarine U-boat that is very successful in its missions. But at the end of World War I, Austria winds up losing its coastland. And during this time, Baron von Trapp also lost his wife, who had passed away while he was at war. So the movie really begins with him coming back from that, and he's got 7 children, and he's trying to figure out, what am I going to do with this new, I have all this experience but no career, and I have all these children but no wife. And so he starts looking for someone to help him out. Now, what you also need to know about Mr. Baron von Trapp is he has got a very strict regimen. So his kids are going to behave and act a very certain way. The children are going to be smart, and they're going to complete all their studies. They are going to be polite and know how to navigate the society's expected behaviors. They're going to be fit and distinguished in every way. And while all of these things could describe them, once he brings this governess in that he expects to carry that on, she begins to reveal to him that these kids could also be described as someone who's hungering for a relationship with their father. And some of them are hungering for the opportunity just to leave and get away from this family completely. During the movie, this always causes me to stop and wonder, am I a captain at my home, or am I a father? Am I a leader? What would it look like if that described me? Maybe I would have children who by the age of 4 had memorized all the books of the Bible. By the age of 7, they had a repertoire of Bible verses that they had memorized and tucked away, and on command they could recite those and call them out. As they moved into their preteen ages, maybe they would become more proficient in their schoolwork, but also be able to balance that with an athletic ability or some sort of musical instrument or something to further distinguish them from the children their own age. And on our regimen would go. And while I admit that this works for so many, and I'm not suggesting that this is wrong, for others it has been noted that it produces fatigue and it produces frustration. It produces fear of failure and oftentimes even bitterness over unrealistic expectations. And so this morning, what I really hope to suggest is we ignite in our parenting, no matter what our plan, no matter what our regimen is, we ignite in our parenting and make sure that our home is a place where every member of the family longs to be there. That doesn't mean that our home is a party 24/7. And as we talked about the week before last, that doesn't mean that we don't discipline. It doesn't mean that we don't set up expectations and goals in our family. It doesn't mean that there aren't consequences. But it does mean that while we explore those and we pursue our goals, we find joy on that journey. Whether that goal is heaven, we need to find joy as we push and encourage our children, our families towards the goal of heaven. Maybe that benchmark is some other worldly success. We need to not get caught up in pursuing our goals at the cost of misery. And I'm going to admit right now that there might be some here, and I know there are those within the world that'll say, wow, Sunday morning sermon was a whole bunch of fluff. We're going to talk about being happy. We're going to talk about just having a good time in our families. In fact, there are those who would say this isn't what the Bible talks about at all. Paul said he buffeted his body daily. That doesn't sound like a joyful experience. He said he suffered the loss of all things, counted them as rubbish in order to gain Christ. That doesn't sound like joy. And Jesus himself said, pick up your cross, pick up your means of execution. That doesn't sound like something that can be enjoyed either. Happiness comes in heaven, not in this life. But I want you to check out these few verses here. Proverbs chapter 17 and verse 22, the proverb writer says, a joyful heart is a good medicine, but broken spirit dries up the bones. We don't need a medicine in heaven. In heaven, the sorrows and the illnesses and pains are gone. A joyful heart is good medicine for us today. In 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 10, Peter writes, for the one who desires life, to love and see good days, you might even have to enjoy good days, must keep his tongue from evil and his lips from speaking deceit. He's quoting the psalmist, he's quoting David in Psalm 34 at a time when David's life was not going well. David is in cahoots with the Philistines. That's where he's been driven to by all the persecution that he's receiving. He's running with the Philistines and he's acting like he's insane. He's gone mad. But at that time, he writes Psalm 34 and admits there is a way to enjoy life, even with a life as uncertain as his. In John 16:24, it says, until now, you have asked for nothing in my name. Ask and you will receive so that your joy may be made full. Jesus said in this life to his disciples, you can have joy. Your joy can be made complete. Enjoying this life is not an unbiblical principle. In fact, if you want to turn over to the book of Ecclesiastes, so we're going to spend a majority of our time this morning, we will see that the writings of the one referred to as the preacher is going to refer throughout the book the importance of learning to enjoy life now. So we have Ecclesiastes chapter 11, verse 7 through Ecclesiastes 12, verse 8, if you'll read that with me. The light is pleasant, and it is good for the eyes to see the sun. Indeed, if a man should live many years, let him rejoice in them all, and let him remember the days of darkness, for they will be many. Everything that is to come will be futility. Rejoice, young man, during your childhood, and let your heart be pleasant during the days of young manhood. Follow the impulses of your heart and the desires of your eyes, yet know that God will bring you to judgment for all these things. So remove grief and anger from your heart, put away pain from your body, because childhood and the prime of life are fleeting. Remember also your Creator in the days of your youth, before the evil days come and the years draw near when you will say, I have no delight in them. Before the sun and the light and the moon and the stars are darkened and the clouds return after the rain, in the days that the watchmen of the house tremble and the mighty men stoop, the grinding ones stand idle because they are few, and those who look through windows grow dim. The doors on the street are shut as the sound of the grinding mill is low, and one will arise at the sound of the bird, and all the daughters of the song will sing softly. Furthermore, men are afraid of a high place and of terrors on the road. The almond tree blossoms, the grasshopper drags himself along, and the caperberry is ineffective. For man goes to his eternal home while mourners go about in the street. Remember him before the silver cord is broken and the golden bowl is crushed. The pitcher by the well is shattered and the wheel at the cistern is crushed. Then the dust will return to the earth as it was. The spirit will return to God who gave it. Vanity of vanity, says the preacher. All is vanity. He doesn't use these words specifically. I don't believe it's too far of a stretch to say that God, speaking through the preacher, is instructing us to enjoy the journey that we are on. Now, this lesson is specifically for the individual. He calls for individuals to learn these lessons, but if you take a group of individuals that make up a family that have been taught by these principles, it has a profound effect upon them. What we need to see is that what he talks about in Ecclesiastes 11 through 12 is applicable to all of the family. There's something all of us can learn. Parents, we need to learn something from these words. We need to recognize that the days of our children pass by quickly. In fact, just Friday, as Atticus was laying in the bed, Holly leaned over to me and said, "He's a week old today." And the obviousness of that statement was quickly surpassed by the unbelievableness. It's already been a week. It just went by so fast. These days of him lying on our chests or sleeping in our laps, they're going to come to an end. Just like the days of our children snuggling together with us on the couch will be replaced by, "I want the recliner and have my own comfort over here. Mom and Dad, you stay over there." The days of them making loud noises and running through our houses like a stampede is going to be replaced by phone calls and video chats, and they're going to move on in their lives. So we take time to enjoy the moments that we have today. One of the very first songs that I ever sung to my wife, we were still in high school together. And I have gone on to label this, whether she likes it or not, as our song, since we didn't have one, was the song "Remember When" by Alan Jackson. And the song has like 6 verses, but one of them, towards the end, kind of brings this recollection to the songwriter's mind. It says, "Remember when we said when we turn gray, when the children grow up and move away, we won't be sad, we'll be glad for all the life we've had, and we'll remember when." I think we look at that first story about the magic fish and we think that's a little bit silly. There's no such thing as that. And certainly we're not going to wish our life away. But are we going to be able to look back on a life lived and remember when? Or are we going to waste it pursuing things that beckon our attention as great, important things? Maybe it's our jobs, or it's the education that we desire for our children, athletics, something that causes us to miss out on the things that God is putting into our life that we can richly enjoy. There's so many things that will happen in the days of our children's lives. Maybe some of them are already gone and they can't be recaptured. Their first tooth, and then losing their first tooth. Their first love, and their first heartbreak. These things that will occur in their lives. The old cliche goes that no one on their deathbed looks back and pines away for one more day in the office, one more day at their job. What are we going to look back on and desire one more day of? If our regiment is to create the world's best biblical scholars, I think that is a fantastic thing to aim our kids towards. Maybe though we say, no, I want a child that is the best sports star. And they are accomplished in some form of athletics. Or I want my child to be one of the brightest minds of the future, or just to be some sort of instrumental aficionado. And we ensure that they work on those things. We ensure that takes a large portion of our focus in their lives. I'm not suggesting that those things are wrong. Just suggesting let's make sure as well that we take time to enjoy the light, to enjoy the beauty of the life that we have together, of the time that we can share. Rejoice in these years. Because as the preacher says, the light is pleasant, is good for eyes to see the sun. Rejoice in these days, because there are days of darkness that will be many. Days of darkness will come. Our children are going to have to face difficult things. We need to make sure that there's something for them to look back on during those times that brings joy into their life. And also to the young, the preacher speaks out. And I realize that I speak out to the young, and the biggest majority of ours aren't here, as many of them are sick. So parents, this is up to you to take the message to them and make sure that they hear it as well. To the young, the preacher says, rejoice in your youth. These days will quickly be replaced by greater responsibilities. The days of your youth are going to go away, and then as they go away, what you get in return are things like bills and employment responsibilities and taxes. You'll get taxes. That's a fun thing about growing up. Follow the desire of your heart, he says. We might say have fun and be a kid, but we also would hearken you to listen to the warning of the preacher as well. He says, enjoy the impulses, the desires of your heart, whatever looks good to your eyes, but remember God. Remember, God is the judge, and he will judge you on these things. Now, this evening, we are going to spend some more time talking about judgment from the book of Ezekiel. So we won't preach that sermon this morning, but one of the most heartbreaking things about the judgment that God brings on Israel was not because of their idolatry. It was not because of their greed. It was not because of their self-righteousness. It was because they forgot their God. They did not remember the Lord. And so the ecclesiastical preacher says, young men, young women, live your life, but remember your God. Have fun, but glorify him through it. Follow the desires of your heart, but make sure you honor your father and mother. And I think there's a lesson in that for parents as well. They need to know this, so we need to remember that. We want them to grow up and become compassionate. We want them to grow up and become hard workers. We want them to grow up and become servants in the Lord's kingdom. And you better believe that ahead of them, they will face trials such as we have faced, and they will likely face things that we may not ever have even dreamed we would deal with. But today, they are sons and they are daughters. Today, they are ones who will have to look back on life, the life that we create together, the life that we live together. And so when we read these passages in Ecclesiastes, what comes to my mind is let's create memories that they can look back on and laugh at. Let's create memories that they can look back on and be filled with joy and warmth over. Let's create memories so that when dark days come and they cry tears of joy, remembering the fond memories, remembering the examples that were set, remembering the love that was poured out into the family, remembering that they were important parts of this family, and that our goal was not just heaven, but them in heaven. It was not just some accomplishment in the world, but them in this accomplishment. They were an important part of that. Let's create families that take time to enjoy the journey they are on. Some of the fondest memories I have of either of my grandfathers come from stories from the people that they affected, events that I wasn't even there for. Both my grandfathers made it a goal to have relationships with people that they would enjoy. That doesn't mean that they somehow watered down truth. That doesn't mean that they tried to compromise their values. It just means as they stood for the truth and they followed God, they invited other people to see the joy that caused in them. They tried to share that joy in the world. They laughed with people. They helped people. They worked with people. And as those stories are told to me, years down the road, I didn't experience that. I don't have that, but those memories fill my life with joy. They make it a little bit sweeter as I reflect on all the time that I didn't get to spend with them as they have passed away. And this is not just I apologize, kids that are taking notes. This is not just a concept that the Old Testament brings out. You notice that a phrase that he used in Ecclesiastes chapter 11 was that the evil days were coming. In fact, it's actually in chapter 12, verse 1. Remember the Creator in the days of your youth, before the evil days come, and you will say, I have no delight in them. And he goes on to talk about these days that would come as we grow older and all of the pains of that old age that comes with it. Talks about not being able to see as well anymore, not being able to hear as well anymore, that we are easily woken from our sleep, our body experiences pains, and he says, as all these things go on and you begin to look at your life and say, I don't have any pleasure, he says, live your life while you can. But remember God in the days of your youth, because one day it won't be as easy. If you've ever tried to start reading the Bible after years and years of not reading the Bible, you find out that it's hard to get started. If your life has been years and years without the practice of prayer, and you say, I feel like I need to start praying more, it's hard to get that started. He says, start this young, because life is going to get difficult as these evil days, these days of difficulty come upon you. Well, that idea of enjoying the journey while we are on it, because things don't tend to always get better, Ephesians chapter 5 brings up the same idea. In Ephesians chapter 5, Paul shares this important understanding for those who live in the light. He says that if you're trying to be an imitator of God, you are walking as children of light. Verse 15, he says, you need to know that the days are evil. Just like the preacher said in Ecclesiastes, the days are evil. Paul says, be careful then how you walk. Be careful how you live in these evil days and redeem, your translation might say, make the most of these times. Families, make the most of our times together. Make the most of this time as we set on our journeys. Make the most of this time as we set goals in front of us, goals to succeed in life, goals to succeed in drawing closer to God and being with Him in heaven. Make the most of the time. Use it wisely. Maybe you do that through playing together. Setting time aside for the family to go out and play some sport together, toss a frisbee around. Maybe your family says, we're going to have some sort of jam session. We're all going to sit around and play instruments. Maybe we cook together. Maybe that's how our family does this, is we get in the kitchen and we concoct all sorts of wild creations. Or maybe we get out in the garage and we build something, or we tinker on an engine, or something that we do together. I think it's also important to stress at this point that just because, parents, it's something that you really like to do doesn't mean that it necessitates that it's something your kids really like to do. Part of enjoying the journey, part of creating a home where they look back and go, I want to be a part of this legacy that put God first, that followed in His path, not just because I know it's the right thing to do, but because I know this family loved me and this family made it important to show that to me by asking me what I wanted to do. I know one of Easton's absolute favorite things to do is play a board game. There was a time when I loved that, but when I look on what's fun, I don't think of a board game, especially since I think to date I've never beat him. But if we're going to set aside time to do something that all the family loves, we're going to set aside time to sit down as a family and play a board game. If we will do this, make the most of our time together, if we will do this, sowing happiness into our life goals and expectations, if we will do this, remembering the Creator who one day we're going to have to give an account to, I'm confident that we can look back on life and say that this journey together was an enjoyable one. There's one last story that I want to share with you, and this one has been hitting me a little bit harder as of late. It comes from the father's perspective, but I imagine with a little bit of creativity, you can apply it to whatever place in the family that you hold. But the story is about a father and two fathers and two sons. The first goes as the father's car turns up the street and he heads towards the driveway of his house. A little boy stands behind the leg of his mom, looking out the window, holding back tears as he sheepishly says, "Mommy, Dad's almost home." Across town, another father turns up the street as he heads towards the driveway he lives. And a boy runs down the driveway shouting back, "Mommy, Dad's almost home." Can I wait by the driveway? Those are two different homes, two different families. And I'm trying a lot harder to be the latter. I know in my life I have been the former. I want to sow seeds of joy into the family that we have. As we conclude this lesson, I want you to be aware that doing so, all the fun, following of the desires of your heart, all of these things, they bring you something that makes this life seem a little bit more palatable. They bring you temporary joy. And yes, we will look back on it and we will laugh. We will look back on it and we will enjoy those moments. But as we referenced Jesus saying before, I want to make your joy complete. I want to make your joy fulfilled. That's the joy that God offers through His Son, Jesus. Truly, all of life's moments which we relish and treasure are going to be worthless on the day of judgment if we stand before our God and we hear, "Depart from me, I never knew you." And so if you're here this morning, there's one more family I want to tell you about. The family of God. We are united under Christ, who is our brother, but also our head, our leader. He guides us. We have been washed of our sins by His blood that was shed on the cross through baptism. And we have a promise. As the family of God, we have a promise by God who cannot lie, and we have hope in the day of judgment. As the family of God, we will spend eternity with Him in light, away from sorrow and from pain. And so when we come together as the family of God, we come together to remind one another that the days are evil and to encourage one another to live a life that is filled with love and good works. So we can look back in difficult times with joy. We do that because we're following the example of our Savior, Jesus. In Hebrews chapter 12, verse 2, the Hebrew author says, looking unto Him, looking unto Christ, the author of our salvation, we look to Him. Why? It says, because for the joy that was laid before Him, He endured the cross, despised the shame, and is set down at the right hand of God's throne. Because of joy, He did difficult and hard things. Let's enjoy the journey together. If there's someone here today that we can help that is needing the encouragement of their family, that is needing someone to lean upon, to help them through difficult things, we want to be that. And if there's someone here today who has not yet become a member of the family of God, we want you to know that not only is God standing ready to welcome you in, there's a family here at Southside that wants to assist you in that as well. If you believe Jesus is the Son of God, and if you are willing to turn from your sins and come to Him in faith, being baptized to have those sins washed away, what you will find is forgiveness, you will find hope, and you will find a family here to walk with you as we enjoy this journey together. If we can assist you with that, come forward right now and let's talk together as we stand and sing.